Hello, in this lecture we're going to continue working problems which would be the type of problems that could be in the format of test questions, being multiple choice question type formats. These are just going to be the stems of the problems. We're not going to look at multiple choice answers, but these are the smaller types of problems that could be formatted in a multiple choice setting. So I'm going to work them in Excel. Some things are better to be worked in Excel, some things are better to be worked outside of Excel. However, even if we are practicing for a test outside of Excel, it might be good to work through in Excel in some cases to set up the format and then go back and work them outside. Some problems, if it's better to write them out, I'll try to write those out by hand as well. I'm going to pull this over to this side and then look at another worksheet over here. This is just an example problem, and it gives us a trial balance over here which can tell us some things. I would always have this open whenever you're practicing or whenever you can during any kind of test taking, because it'll tell you if an account is an asset, liability, or equity. For some cases, it'll show you how to calculate net income and the types of accounts that are there. So it might be good to have various other types of problems open when working through these types of questions. So if the asset of a business increases by $111,000 during the period of time and its liabilities increase $78,000 during the period of time, equity in the business must have. So this is going to be another accounting equation type of question. So what you want to do is find the accounting equation or write it out. We did one up here which has the accounting equation in it, so I'm just going to copy that. Here's our accounting equation. I'm just going to paste that right here, and then we'll just enter the information. We have assets equal liabilities plus equity. We know that assets have increased, so we're talking about increases and decreases. Same idea though. If this increased by $111,000, that's going to have to increase the liabilities, or that's going to have to equal the liabilities must have increased by $78,000, plus we're going to say equity is then X. We don't know what happened to equity. So then we're going to solve for X. So we need to get X by itself. X is on this side, and therefore we're going to get rid of this $78,000. So in order to make that 0, we're going to subtract $78,000 to make that 0. If we do that on this side of the equal sign, we're also going to have to do it on this side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract $78,000 and then see what our new balance is. So I'm going to say 111 plus the negative, which is a subtraction problem. So 111 minus 78 will give us 33. And that, of course, equals the 78 minus the 78. I'm doing a plus because it's minus a negative, but we know it should be 0, of course, if we do that subtraction problem. And then we're going to say 0 plus, and then, of course, X. And so now we can eliminate the 0 because anything plus 0 is itself. X equals 33,000. We're going to want to write that in this format. X equals 33,000. And we know that X is equity, which equals 33,000. And this should be an equal sign, of course. So next we have a similar problem where we're going to be working with the accounting equation. It says if the liabilities of a company increased $80,000 during the period of time and equity in the company decreased by $22,000 during the same time, what is the effect on assets? So again, we have 2 of the 3 parts of the change to our accounting equation. So I'm going to scroll back up here. I'm going to copy our accounting equation. And that accounting equation is assets equal liabilities plus equity. And we know that in this case, we have liabilities in the company increased $80,000. So we'll just plug that in there. I'm going to say plus because that's part of our equation. But note that we're saying that the equity decreased. So I'm going to keep that as a plus as our equation, but I'm going to say that it's a negative 22,000. So that might look a little strange. I'm going to make assets X, that's the unknown. And we can think about this a couple different ways, but you note here that we basically have 2 signs next to each other now. We have a plus and a minus, plus a negative 22,000 next to each other. Whenever I see that, when I see 2 signs next to each other, I would rewrite that as one sign. So if you have a positive and a negative next to each other, that's going to be a negative. A plus and a minus is basically a negative. So if I say plus a negative, that's the same thing as me just saying 80,000 minus 22,000. So I would rewrite this in that form. I'll just say X equals, and then we're going to say 80,000, and instead of plus a negative and a positive, just a negative minus the 22,000. So now it's minus a positive number, so we only have one sign that we can think about now. So now we're on this equation. We're trying to get X is already by itself, so now all we have to do is the function on the other side, 80,000 minus 22,000. Therefore, x equals, and I'm just going to say 80,000 minus the 22,000, and that's going to equal 58,000. And we know that x, of course, in this case is assets, which equal the 58,000. Let's take a look at the next one. If assets are 377,000 and equity is 126,000, then what are liabilities? Once again, they've given us two of the three pieces, so I'm just going to copy that accounting equation again and paste that down here. And so we're going to say assets are 377,000. So we're going to use 377,000 equals, and we don't know what liabilities are, so we're just going to say that's x plus equity of 126,000. So there's our equation, and we need to get x by itself here. So there's x, we need to get it by itself, and therefore we got to get rid of this 126. So we're going to subtract minus 126,000 from both sides. So I'll put it over here. I'm actually going to bring this up a bit. If I do it to this side, I got to do it to this side as well for algebra. 126,000. If we do the math, then I'm going to say the 377,000 plus the negative, a subtraction problem, 377 minus 126 gives us the 251. That, of course, equals, I'm going to keep the x plus, this is going to be subtraction, 126 minus 126. I'm going to say equals this cell, 126 plus the negative. It's a subtraction problem, but I'm saying plus the negative equals the 0. So obviously we can get rid of that because x plus 0 is just x. Therefore, we have the 251,000 equals x. And we can rewrite that with x on the left, which we tend to like to see. So if that's true, if 251,000 equals x, then x equals 251,000 as well. And once again, we know that x is assets. So assets equal the 251,000. All right, so the next one we have here has net income of 23,955 and assets at the beginning of the year of 205, assets at the end of the year of 251. Compute its return on assets. So first we have to get the return on assets calculation or ratio here, and we know that the return on assets is going to be our net income, which is going to be the 23,9. Well, let's write this out. It's going to be net income over, I'm going to select Alt Enter in order to have it over. Alt Enter will let me go to the bottom of the cell and put this in the format of a ratio. So we have over the average assets. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this up here. I'm going to go to the tab and underline that, and then also center this. So we'll center this like so. We'll hit enter and then center it. Okay, so we don't have to, we just need to know what that formula is. So if you wanted to work on some formatting, you can kind of write it out like that. So we know what net income is. Net income is given to us. We then need to calculate the total average total assets. How do we do that? Well, if we had a calculator, the average is going to be what it is at the beginning of the year, which is 205, plus what it is at the end of the year, plus 251, and that's going to give us this divided by 2. So that's kind of the average. What we're trying to do is say we are at any given point during the year. That's the average point that we're at in the year. So if we think about that, then we have net income. I'll put net income on top, 23,955, and then I'll do that same calculation under here again. We're going to say this equals the 205,000 at the beginning divided by the 251,000, and I'm sorry, plus. Do that one more time. Double click on this, plus, and then divide by 2. Now note that if I do this, it's not going to give me the same number up here. So I just want to show this so you can see the difference in Excel. And notice it didn't give us the same number. The reason is because of the order of operations. So if I double click on this, one reason that sometimes it's actually easier to work this by hand or by a calculator, some types of problems, is when we have to put a formula like this in here, where we have to recognize that it's going to divide before it adds, even though the addition is in front because of the order of operations. So if we put brackets around this, then we'll have this then. So now we're going to have the 23,955 divided by the 228,000. We could do that with a formula. This equals this number divided by the 228. Enter. Now, the reason it's 0, why is it 0? Because we don't have any decimals. So once again, that's the formatting of the cell. So you have to go to Home tab. I'm going to go to this here. We're going to add some decimals. And there we have it. Now, if we want to make it a percent, it's 0.1051. If we made it a percent, then we'd move the decimal 2 places to the right. Excel will do that automatically if we go to here and we make it a percent. And then we want to add, I'm going to add 1 decimal just so we have 10.5. So be careful with the cells and the formatting. If you have a problem like that, it's good to know that in Excel later on. So mess with the Excel and mess with the formatting when you work problems such as this. All right, next one. Company receives 12.2 from the owner to establish a proprietorship. The net effect of the accounting equation would be. So we'll start off with finding our accounting equation up here. So I'm going to find our accounting equation up top. So here's one. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. It's going to copy that. We're going to scroll down to where we are at. And paste that here. So there's our accounting equation. So a company receives 12.2 from the owner. So we're assuming that we received cash from the owner, right? So cash, if we look at our trial balance, it's up here in the green in the assets area. It's an asset. So cash is under assets. So it's going to increase by 12.2. And that's going to equal, there's some other thing that's going to have to happen. And who put the cash in there? The owner. Now the owner is going to be represented by this account, the capital account, which is going to increase. So assets equal liabilities. Liabilities does not change. Equity then must be going up by the same amount, 12.2, in that way. So what's the effect? Assets are going up by 12.2. Equity is going up by 12.2. All right, so let's take a look at the next one. We're going to say using the following information as of December 31st, determine equity. So we're going to have our same accounting equation here. I'm going to copy our accounting equation. And we're going to try to use the accounting equation, like so, to figure out what happens to equity. So using the following information as of December, as of that point in time in December. So they're giving us balance sheet numbers here, and we're assuming this is all the information on the balance sheet. And we got to plug that in there and then find the missing amount. So assets, we know if we have our handy trial balance open, we can see that assets is up here on the top. Therefore, it's, cash is an asset up here at the top. Therefore, we have 58,000 of an asset. Building and equipment. We don't have a building up here. I can check some other worksheets. Let me check another. So here's another type of problem that has some more types of accounts up here that could be a good example. You might want to just, go through them, some of your example problems, and see if some of the trial balance has more of the accounts that you're looking for. This one doesn't have a building, but it does have equipment here, and those are both assets. So they're up here in the green area again. So they're also assets. Building's an asset, equipment's an asset. So I'm going to put that up here, 176,207,000, and I'm just going to add those up now. So the total assets that we're talking about then is the 58. You could do this in a calculator, use the sum function, the 176 plus the 207, and then that is going to equal. And next thing we have our liabilities. It's going to give us liabilities, which is 142,000 plus X, the unknown. So now we have our accounting equation. We just need to solve for X then again. So X is on this side. We need to get it by itself. So we're going to subtract the 142,000 from each side. If we do it to this side to make it 0, we have to do it to this side to be even according to algebra. And then we can just formulate this. So the 441,000 plus the negative, which is just a subtraction problem, the 441 minus the 142 is going to give us the 299,000, of course, equals, and then this is going to be 0, we can see, but if we do the math, we're going to say this is the 142 plus the negative, or just minus, gives us 0 plus, and then X. And then, of course, X plus 0 is just going to be X, and therefore what we have is 299,000 equals X. We can flip the formatting of this. We could say then that means that X, read it on from right to left. I'd rather see X equals 299,000. because if 299 equals x, then x equals 299. And we know that x then is the equity. So equity then must equal the 299,000. All right, let's see what else we have here. Using the following information, determine the amount in equity. So it's the same type of problem we have here. So we're going to take our accounting equation. Once again, I'm just going to copy this accounting equation, do the same type of exercise, and post this here. And we're just going to say, all right, let's list these out. And we're assuming we have all the information as of a point in time on the balance sheet. And we can just plug that into our accounting equation. And therefore, we have cash, building, land. Those are all assets. If we look at our trial balance, they're all in the green section. We have cash. And we have land, and we don't have the building. I don't know how we have land but no building. We bought land, we didn't put the building up yet. But there is that, so we know they're all assets in this case. So we're going to say 61,000 cash is an asset, 125 buildings an asset, 2015 land is an asset. If we add those up, I'm going to add them up with the sum function. You could do it with a calculator, but the sum function would be faster. Or you can do it by in your head, of course, but then we got the 61 plus the 125 plus the 2015 would give us the 383. Then we know that that's going to equal, they give us all the liabilities straight out, 126.5 plus equity, which is x. So there we have that. Now we got to get x by itself, of course. How do we do that? We're going to have to get rid of this number. We're going to have to subtract that number out. So this is going to be a negative 126.5. And that's going to equal, and if we do it to that side, we have to do it to this side, 126.5, and we have to subtract that out now. So we're going to say this equals the 383 plus the negative, which is a subtraction problem. The 383,000 minus the 126.5 gives us the 256.5, which equals, if we subtract this out, we're going to say the 126.5 plus the negative, just a subtraction problem. That's going to give us 0, of course. Plus, and then we're going to say x. So this is what we have. We're going to say x plus 0 equals the 256.5. Therefore, the 256.5 equals anything plus 0 is itself. Therefore, 256.5 equals x. If we want to read this from right to left, we know that if 256.5 equals x, then x must then equal 256.5. And if that's the case, we know that equity is x. So we're going to say then that equity equals the 256.5. All right, next one. We're going to determine the net income of a company for which the following information is available for the month. So employer salary, interest, rent, and consulting revenue. So if we think about net income, we can take a look at our equation over here and say, how do we calculate net income? Well, net income is down here in one of our practice problems. It's income minus expenses. So here's net income. It's going to be the income in this case. We're summing up this amount, the income less the expenses. In this case, it's debits minus the credits. But note that what we have in essence, we have income, which in this case is a negative number, minus all the expenses, which means that the credits are winning. In this case, we're not going to talk about debits and credits over here. We could, we don't have to. In this case, we're just going to say plus and minus. We're going to say the revenue coming in minus the expenses. All the stuff on the income statement has got to be pretty much revenue minus revenue or expense. So if we thought about that, then we're just going to say, well, revenue in this case is consulting revenue. I'm going to put that in an outer column. These are not debits and credits, but I'm going to try to sum this up kind of like you would on an income statement. So we're just going to say revenue is 436,000. We only have one line item, so I'm going to put that on an outer column. And then I'm going to have our expenses. Well, I'm going to put a colon on that and say, hey, we're going to have more than one expense. And the expenses are these three. So I'm just going to copy these three. We have expenses of employee salary, interest expense, rent expense. I'm just going to paste these down here. And notice I indented them here. If you want to know how to indent, you can go to this tab and use this indenting function just to make it indented like that. And then we'll just then plug the numbers in. I'm going to plug the numbers into an inside column. Notice I have some overlap here. It's not going to hurt anything when we punch the number in, however. So this is 189,000. This is 19,000. This is 29,000. Then we could rewrite this. I'm going to sum this up to the outside. This is going to be total expenses. and I'm going to say enter and then go back on it. So I'm on the cell rather than in the cell. And I'm just going to, just for formatting purposes, go up here again and indent it twice. This may be how we might make the income statement look. And then we'll sum the expenses up, equals the sum, just the expenses, the 189, the 19, the 29. And we're just going to add those up. And that gives us to the 237. So now we have revenue minus expenses on the outer column. That's what will give us net income. So we're just going to say this equals revenue minus expenses. And that's going to give us our net income. Now, if you wanted to do that with just a calculator and not go through all the subtotal, it would just be revenue, 436,000, which you'd have to start basically down here, minus all the expenses, minus the 189,000, minus the 19,000, minus the 29,000. That gives us the 199. Let's see what else we got here. Has net income of 63, assets at the beginning, 270, and assets at the end. Compute its return on assets. So once again, we got our return on assets. So I'm going to put the formula for return on assets. And how do you calculate that? It's going to be the net income. That's what we earned, how we did throughout the year. So we're going to say that is 63. Well, let's do this. Net income. This is the formula. I'm going to hit Alt Enter just to write this out. And then we have to have the average assets. And then I'm going to highlight this up here and underline this. Fonts, underline that, enter. And then I'm just going to center this just so we can practice the formatting. That's the formula. So net income we know. We're going to put that on the top. That's 63,000. That's how we did. Now, average assets, if I did that on a calculator, it's going to be the 270,000 plus the 320,000 divided by, in this case, 2. So we're going to say how we were at one point in time, the beginning, how we were at another point in time, the end, and then take the average divided by 2 of those 2 points. That's how we were doing at any given time during that average point. Now, how do we do that with a formula? We'd have to say this equals the beginning, 270,000 plus the ending, 320,000, and then divided by 2. But notice that there's an order of operations problem. If I hit enter, I'm not going to get the same number. And that's because it divided before it added. Why? Because of order of operations. Even though the adding in front, we need to then put brackets around these numbers. And so we got the 270 minus the 320. And then if we enter it, then we get the same number. Now we can just divide this out. So we got the 63 divided by the 295. And note, once again, we come up with 0. Why? Because we don't have any decimals right now. And so in Excel, if you did that on a calculator, you would. But recognize in Excel, we took out the decimals to make it easier to look at. To add them, we'd go to Home, Numbers, and we just add decimals like this. We can put 4 out there. And then if we wanted to see it in terms of percent, we can then hit the percent sign. That puts 2 places and add maybe a decimal here as well.